Hello to everyone. I am really sorry for the delay. My name is Valerie Khodara. I'm a psychologist. I am located in France, and I will tell you about cognitive and behavior therapy. So, as you understood, we've had some technical problems. So again, I apologize for the delay, and I I am also sorry because I think that you won't see me. So instead, you will just see the PowerPoint presentations without being able to look at me. So I'm going to take you through the presentation. And so today we are, it's going to be an introduction to cognitive and behavior therapy. A long time ago, we started a long time ago with Epictetus after Jesus Christ. Epictetus once said, men are disturbed not by things, but by the principles and notions which they form concerning things. CBT, cognitive and behavior therapy, draws a lot of inspiration from the Stoicisms, and we believe, as Epictetus, that we are mostly disturbed by our thoughts. So Aaron Beck, who's a psychologist, explained approximately the same thing by stating that cognitive therapy is a system of psychotherapy that attempts to reduce excessive emotional reactions and self-defeating behavior by modifying the faulty or erroneous thinking and maladaptive beliefs that underlie these reactions. So Aaron Beck is a psychologist who played a great part in cognitive and behavior therapy, and basically he's saying approximately the same thing that what Epictetus said many centuries ago. So CBT is about reducing excessive emotional reactions, which is the reason why people come and see us psychologists, because they suffer from emotions, excessive negative emotions. And the emotions are really at the core of our behaviors, because whenever we feel bad, when we feel discomfort, anxiety, fear, or anger, it pushes us to, it spurs us to do something about it and to reduce those emotions. So there is a very important link between emotions and behaviors. The problem is that when we experience negative emotions, sometimes people use self-defeating behavior to get rid of the emotion. So the CBT approach is collaborative. It is built on trust. So it means that we have to create a good relationship with our patient, but it is something that is necessary in many approaches. But here there is not one. This is not just the psychotherapist who knows things and is active, whereas the patient would be passive, not knowing anything. We really work in a collaborative way. We exchange information a lot, and it won't be just the therapist talking, or it won't be just the patient talking either. It is active, as you may have understood from what I just said. It is a different approach than the one we may have, than some of the approaches which are more passive for the patients. Typically, there are some therapy where we know that the patient may lie down on a couch, and the therapist will be behind him, waiting, listening, actively listening, of course, but more passive. Here, both are very active. It is an approach that is based on open-ended questioning. So it is an approach where we will ask a lot of questions and require from our patients to think really deeply about his beliefs and his thoughts, and we ask our patients to look at things from a different point of view, as if he had to question his deepest beliefs. It is also an approach that is highly structured and focused. We follow procedures, we have protocols, guidelines that help us be efficient and take advantage of all of the research which have been made regarding various pathologies, mental problems. So, what we can understand from the two first sentences that I showed you, the one from Epictetus and the one from Beck, is that it is against the common sense model. The common sense model will state that there is an event, and that event triggers an emotion. This is how we experience our everyday life. Something happens and I feel suddenly an emotion. It is a negative emotion, or is it a positive emotion? But very often you will think that what causes the emotion is what has just happened immediately. I may be angry, and I will believe that this is what you said which made me angry. Or if I feel sadness, I will think that this is what you've just said that made me sad. The cognitive model is different. There is an event, but between the event and the emotion, there is the meaning that we give to the event. This is the cognitive model, and this is another way of stating of saying what Epictetus said a few centuries ago. It is what counts is the meaning that we give to the event, and this is the meaning that we give to the event that triggers the emotion. Of course, the meaning that we give to the event is depends on the event itself, but the event is not directly responsible of the emotion. In between the event and the emotion, there is the meaning that we give to the event. Example, you are walking down the high street and there's someone you know that walks by without acknowledging you, without saying hello. What could we think? What could you think in this situation? I let you think about that and imagine what could be the possibilities, the different possibilities. Well, and also what could you feel? Okay, so you have your thoughts and you have also your emotions. So there could be more than 4, but at least there are 4 interpretations and 4 emotions. Over from that party last night. Or you could say, nobody wants to talk to me. No one likes me. What else could you say? She's got a nerve being so snooty. She doesn't even acknowledge me. Or you could also say, I don't want her to see me. I won't know what to say. She'll think I'm stupid and boring. What are the emotions that those people will experience? I imagine that for the first one, I don't want her to see me. I won't know what to say. She'll think I'm stupid and boring. I could experience sadness, fear, fear, anxiety. In the second case, nobody wants to talk to me. No one likes me. I guess I'll experience sadness, guilt. She's got a nerve being so snooty. I will probably feel anger, maybe a little bit of sadness. Or, and the last one, she's probably still hungover from that party last night. I would be amused, but not experiencing negative emotions. So, 4 interpretations, 4 emotions, 4 thoughts, 4 different emotions. So again, this is not the event that triggers the emotion, but the thoughts that I have, the meaning that I give to the event. So it is important to acknowledge that the thoughts are the core of what we feel. Thoughts are very, very important because emotions are very important. Remember, I told you that when we are experiencing negative emotions, it spurs us to do something about it, to do whatever is necessary to lower the level of negative emotions. So emotions are also at the core of what we do, but what is at the core of our emotions are the thoughts. So the second question is, but what determines our thoughts? Why is it that someone in the previous example will experience anger and the other one will experience no negative feeling and the other one will experience sadness, guilt? So what is at the core of our thoughts? What determines them? To answer that question, we will go through some
of the CBT principles. One cognitive principle is that it is our interpretations of events, not even the events themselves, which are crucial. So I think that by now you know that. I've insisted on that a lot, but it is very important. Our interpretations are the result of a mix between temperament and what we learn from our experiences. So something that is important in CBT is that are the learning theories. We believe that since the beginning of our lives, when we are born, we of course come with a temperament, a psychological temperament, some things that come from our ancestors, it's linked to the biological field. So like as much as we have blue, brown eyes, dark hair, blonde hair, we also come with some characteristics, psychological characteristics. They are just tendencies, but they are important. And then when we come to life, when we are born, then we arrive in a new world and we start experiencing things from the age of a baby and all along our life we experience things. But during the first 20 years of our life, those experiences will have a huge effect on our personality. And we draw lessons. We draw lessons from the experiences that we live, whether they are experiences that we live with our parents or other important people, or experiences that we have with our friends, experiences that we have at school, learning things, doing things, succeeding, failing, etc. We learn all the time. We learn English, we learn mathematics, we learn history, but we also learn how to behave. What is it to be a good girl? What is it to be a good boy? How to be loved? How to be a man, a woman, etc. We learn all the time, and we draw lessons from our experiences, from the contact with our parents, etc. Sometimes we draw conclusions and lessons that are rigid, and sometimes not true. But we will see that later. So, learning is a relatively permanent change in behavior as the result of experience. So this is, in a short sentence, what I wanted to explain earlier. And key learning theories underlie many modern therapies, like CBT, as you might have understood. So there are two principles also in two mechanisms that are very important in learning theory. There is first the classical conditioning, and then there is the operant conditioning. I will just give you a few examples so that you understand what is conditioning. We will go through classical conditioning. So classical conditioning has to do with behavior. So what does shape the behavior? What we do. The theory emerged as part of the behaviorist movement, the theory about CBT. And so what do we observe in classical conditioning? Conditioning is a mechanism, is a learning mechanism. So at first there has been an interesting experience. Maybe some of you have heard about Pavlov's dogs. So Pavlov is a Russian researcher working on dogs, and not about psychology, but he's trying to understand how dogs salivate and studying salivation, dog salivation. So he comes up with an experience. He notices that when you provide food to a dog, it triggers salivation. So the food is an unconditional stimulus. The blue letters UCS stand for unconditional stimulus, and UCR under the dog, it's unconditional response. It means that the dog, whenever he sees food, will salivate. If you, it is something that is automatic. If you see a lion, you will run. It is automatic. So the dog salivates when he sees food, and then the researchers, Pavlov, has the idea to ring a bell right before showing the food. So the bell is a neutral stimulus. Neutral because when you ring the bell to the dog, it doesn't have any effect on him. He doesn't salivate. So as you can see at the bottom, so an unconditional stimulus automatically produces an unconditional response, whereas the neutral stimulus does not produce any salivation. So this is before before the experience starts. So in the second phase, there is an association which is made right before the food is brought to the dog. Pavlov rings the bell. So the unconditional stimulus, the food, is paired with the neutral stimulus, the bell. We do that several times. So right before giving the food to the dog, there's the bell ringing. Oops, sorry, I went too far. Okay. Sorry again. Okay, so this is before conditioning. We've seen that. So this is when we pair things, and now that's after conditioning. So Pavlov notices that it is just the bell, the bell will be enough for the dog to produce salivation. So the bell, which was a neutral stimulus, has become what we call a conditioned stimulus because it produces the conditioned response, which is salivation, which is similar to the unconditional response produced by the food alone. So this is how we have taught the dog to salivate just when he hears sound of the bell. So this is classical conditioning. This is a way of learning. The dog has learned to recognize the bell as an object, a sound, which will announce that food is coming. There has been another very famous experiment. It is a small animal, a very nice one, with a white fur. And so, as in the Pavlov experiment, Watson repeats the association several times. Whenever Albert plays with the rabbit, Watson produces a very loud noise hitting a metal bar with a hammer. What we observe is that little Albert became very fearful of the rabbit. He became fearful of the rabbit, but of all the other things that look like the white rabbit. He became afraid of the white rat. He became afraid of the white fur of his mother. He became afraid of everything that was that had fur and white fur. So he had been conditioned to be afraid of the rabbit. He was taught. He went through a learning process to be afraid of the rabbit. And that are very important to understand certain behaviors that we may adopt. There is the operant conditioning. I will not develop it, but it is another mechanism that explains how people can learn from the consequences of their behaviors. If I do something that has a positive behavior, that has a positive effect, then I will have a tendency to repeat the previous behavior. If, on the contrary, what I do has a negative consequence, it will push me to avoid repeating the preceding behavior. So this is operant conditioning. So we go back to the principles. We've seen that there is this cognitive principle, which has been developing since the beginning of presentation. There is a behavioral principle. There are several of them. There are a lot of them. So the second one is the behavioral principle. What we do has a powerful influence on our thoughts and emotions. I need to get my battery, as you may see on the presentation. So let me just take a moment to do that. Sorry for the interruption. Okay. So okay, so I'm ready to go. So again, what we do has a powerful influence on our thoughts and emotions. Examples of behaviors, avoidance strategy. Avoidance strategy, what is the effect on thoughts or emotions? Well, if I am afraid of dogs, for instance, I will avoid them. Whenever I avoid things, I prevent myself from living new experiences. I maintain my I keep thinking what I think. I will not learn from new experiences. If I may there I might find that there are some dogs that are nice and do not bite. So by avoiding situations, we maintain the strength of our thoughts. Uh, with exposure, with exposure, I may reinforce sometimes when the exposure is violent. I may I may go through a really difficult time. Like if I take the example of the dog, if I'm really very afraid of dog, and if I choose to expose myself to a big dog, I may experience a fear that is so high that I will keep avoiding dogs. Testing a belief is it has to do also with exposure. Sometimes I can expose myself to touch a dog that is small, and I know that he's quiet. And so by testing the belief that I have regarding dogs, and that might be that all dogs are dangerous, and I will get bitten by a dog if I um, see one, then by testing a belief, I may want to try to touch a dog, um, small dogs. I know that are not mean, and then check if I'm right or not regarding my belief that all dogs are dangerous. So that was the behavioral principle. There is also the continuum principle. For CBT, in CBT, we try to have our patient look at mental health problems as exaggerations of normal processes. Fear is not a problem. Too much fear too often is a problem. Normal anxiety is not a problem, but when it gets very high, it can become pathological anxiety. It's like wishing to succeed. Wishing to succeed is something that can be very positive. It pushes you to learn, to work. But if it comes to the point of being perfect all the time, then it can become a problem. It's like almost with everything. You can have a drink with friends, but if you get too many and get drunk too often, and if you do that alone, it can become also a problem. So it is important to in CBT we insist on stopping saying things in black and white, or yes or no. I feel good or I feel bad, or this is negative all the time. We try to introduce a continuum. There is the here and now principle. So what is that principle? We studies have shown is that it is more fruitful to focus on current processes rather than on the past. Of course, you can imagine that we cannot avoid talking about the past because, as I have explained it earlier, um, what we are, our personality, um, was built over the course of time. And the younger we are, the more we learn and the more sensitive we are as well. So our first experiences and first experiences when we are baby, an infant, or a teenager, all those experiences are very important, and they build our personality and our beliefs, and so they are important. But it is not because we will discover why we are anxious, why we have a phobia and a social phobia, why we are perfectionist, or it's not because we're going to find the origin of a problem that it's going to help us or it's going to solve the problem. So we work on situations, we work with the patient on situations that occur in his current life, things that occur in his life. The dog and the feather is an experience, an interesting experience that will show you how we can become very sensitive, very afraid of something, and through learning, through conditioning, and without no need to go in the past to understand why the dog becomes afraid of a feather. So it is, before we go through the details of this experience, let's say a few words about this the origin of this experience. It is Heinzek is a psychologist, an American. No, it is a German-born psychologist who worked mainly in Great Britain, and he criticized the Watson problem. Remember the experiments I showed you earlier with Watson? The Heinzek has made criticisms of this model. He worked on, he based his model on Wagner's work, work which is about the Russian and American experiments which took place between 1915 and 1955 on classical conditioning. They observed that extinction does not occur all the time. Extinction should occur whenever we stop associating two things together. For instance, if I stop pairing the bell with the food, then in the long run, the bell will stop triggering salivation for the dog. But sometimes it doesn't work like this. Sometimes there is no extinction, even if we stop pairing two things together, which explains traumas, for instance. So there are circumstances like a traumatic event when there is an association that occurs just once and just one time and not a second time, and then we may never see extinction. Just one association can produce a certain result that will last over time. And this is what shows the experiment of the dog and the feather. So Isaac proposes a change in the law of extinctions. He states that two things can happen after a conditioned stimulus without reinforcement is introduced. There could be extinction, or there could be an increase of the conditioned response. Let's see what it means. So this Navalkov's experiment, which took place in 1963, will show you how we can become more and more anxious. So the actors are dogs. One dog, actually. The unconditional stimulus is a shotgun. The shotgun is fired behind a dog's ear. What do you think will happen? The response of the dog is an unconditional response, and it is the increase of the blood pressure. So it is normal. This is what happens. Whereas it's a dog or us. Our reaction when we hear a shotgun will be to increase our blood pressure. So if we repeat the association, we will observe a rapid habituation of the dog's response to the gunshot. Imagine what's going to happen after the 10th or the 20th shotgun is fired. Let's see what happens. So this is what happens. The dog gets used to hearing the shotgun, and after the 12th, 13th, and 30th shotgun, the blood pressure goes back to normal. The dog is used to hearing gunshots, and it doesn't have any reaction. Okay. So the next step of the experiment, we introduce a new actor, a feather, and it is the neutral stimulus. Remember, the neutral stimulus, it is something that has no effect on a dog. The unconditional stimulus is still the shotgun. So we will see how a feather, a neutral stimulus, can become a conditional stimulus. How do we do that? The dog's ear is touched with the feather, and then the shotgun is fired immediately after. This is important. Just after, half of a second after, there's a shotgun. There is just one association. No more shotguns is fired after. So, according to you, what may happen? What will happen? I'm sorry, I would like to hear your comments, but I have no audio. I don't see you. I don't hear you. I don't even have access to the chat. So I can't answer your questions. I'm sorry. So this is what will happen. So as in the first experiment, the dog reacts to the association by having his blood pressure rises to 30 milliliter. And then this is what will happen when we touch the dog's ear with the feather. This is amazing, isn't it? So in this experiment, the association just took place once. We touched the dog's ear with the feather, and then after that, a shotgun was fired. The second time, the first yellow, I'm sorry. So the second time, the dog's ear is touched by the feather, and the reaction of the dog's reaction is approximately the same level. But the third time, fourth time, fifth time, dog's blood pressure keeps rising, and it may rise so much as some dogs could die. So what did happen then during that experiment? The dog, when we touched the dog's ear with the feather, and after that there was a shotgun, the dog had a reaction after we touched his ear with the feather. He learned to protect himself, and his blood pressure rose to a certain level. And with this, so when the second time we touch his ear with the feather, he has the blood pressure raised, and there is no gunshot fired. So there is an association that is made there. When the feather touches my ear, and when I have my blood pressure raising, nothing happens, and I am safe. So this is a learning, and he becomes more and more efficient at reacting to the feather by having the blood pressure rising. And by becoming more and more efficient, he has his blood pressure rising so high that it can kill some dogs. So this is an experiment that shows how one association and can produce a behavior being, in that case, a physiological reaction, the blood pressure rising. So how that reaction can become more and more important. So another CBT principle, it's the interacting systems principle. CBT sees problem as an interaction between thoughts, emotions, behavior, and physiology, and the environment in which the person operates. So we have talked about the link between thoughts, emotions, and behavior. In that last experience, we have seen also what is the part that could play physiology, which is an automatic reaction. But there is also, of course, the environment that counts. So here is another way to put it. there is a constant interaction between thoughts, behaviors, and feelings. Our thoughts have an influence on our feelings as well as on our behaviors. Our behaviors have an influence on our thoughts and our feelings, and feelings are consequences on our thoughts and behaviors. So it is a system that is constantly interacting, and we are constantly learning from things that occur to us. For instance, if you wake up in the morning, okay, and that you have certain thoughts, for instance, you think to yourself, "Oh, there's no point in getting up. I will only mess up again today." Of course, your feelings, your emotions, you will experience depression, and you will feel tired, and your behaviors, you might want to stay in bed and pull your cover over your head, and those behaviors, they may influence your thoughts, like, definitely I'm worth nothing, I can't even get up from my bed, and you will experience more depressing emotion, feel more depressed, and even maybe anxiety, because you will have on your mind all the things that you should do, and that you don't do, and you think about the consequences. So it is a circle, and a vicious circle sometimes. This is a model, another way to look at things. So we have thoughts, behaviors, and feelings, and also the biology that can influence us. We'll see that later when we'll talk about panic attacks, and all that has an influence, and they all influence each other, plus the environment, as stated earlier. And around the circle, we might include some other things, such as what happened in the past, our environment, our present environment, but there is also our past environment and the things that we have learned. An example, so you are on a plane and there are turbulences, sorry. So what might be your thoughts? You might think, if you are very afraid to get on a plane, you might think, well, we will crash. It will, of course, trigger anxiety, fear. So you feel anxiety. We have the habit to rate our emotions between 0 and 10, or 0 or 100, just to have an idea. As I mentioned, one of the CBT principle earlier is the Continuum Principle. It's not that I experience fear or no fear. It is I experience a little fear, some fear, moderate fear, high fear, very high fear, or panic. So, which is why we try to rate our level of emotion. So in that case, it could be 90%. Then what will I do? As I said, as I told you earlier, our emotions, they influence our behavior. I feel really, really very afraid. It will push me to do something to reduce my level of anxiety. So I might want to get some reassurance. I will talk to my neighbor or the people around me. On the biological side, I will have my heart racing. I will have palpitations, rapid breathing, um, choking sensation, maybe, and all that. It might also influence my thoughts. If I feel that bad, it will increase the belief that I have um, in the possibility that we might crash, etc. So these are some examples of feelings and thoughts commonly associated. So, for instance, when we feel, in the case of depression, we will frequently have thoughts such as I am worthless, the future is bleak, or nothing will change. So be very negative about the future, about oneself, and about how things might change. If I feel anxiety, the thoughts that I might have will be different. I will feel in a constant state of danger. I might think that something terrible is going to happen. May have the idea that I won't be able to cope with the problem. I won't be able to deal with it. I don't know. I don't know how to do that. And in the case of anger, the thoughts might be I've been disrespected, or I may think that it is unfair what's happening, or I believe that I won't stand for it. These are just some examples of thoughts that you might have when you feel depression, anxiety, or anger. Okay, so this is a clinical example of a lady. So this is Mrs. K. She's 50 years old. She's married. She has 2 kids. She works in a notarial office. And her complaint is that she experiences excessive anger and claustrophobia. Sorry. So her motivation for consulting, she says that she experiences very strong and frequent anger towards her son during certain situations. So what are those situations? So her son, his name is Francois, he's 14 years old, and he's playing video game online. Mrs. K, she's fixing dinner. It is time to have dinner. She calls him and he replies, wait, sorry, W is missing. Wait, I have to finish the game. Mrs. K, after 5 minutes, she calls him again and he responds, but wait, I am not done yet. Mrs. K, her thoughts will be, I am tired of waiting, dinner is warm and ready, come immediately. This is what she said. She says, actually. Francois will answer, it is always like this. You could have warned me before. You can wait. I will have dinner after. And anyway, I don't like what you've cooked. You can imagine what will be Mrs. K's reaction. She gets probably angry because she unplugs the computer and she starts yelling at his son. So this is an everyday life situation. For the ones of you who have children, it may sound like something normal that occurs sometimes. to have to call for your children to do something, not necessarily you becoming angry, but so here are the thoughts and emotions of Mrs. K. So what we do when we have our patients, we ask them to start observing themselves when in difficult situations. So we give them homework to do, and the first step will be for them to fill out some spreadsheet where the first column will be the details of a triggering situation, like the one we've just seen. The second column might be a column for emotions, like the ones we see right now. So she will write that she feels frustration, anger, anxiety, sadness. Sometimes we ask for our patients to fill out a third column with the sensations. Sensations are the physiological reaction, the body reaction. Sometimes we don't ask for that, but another column will be for the thoughts. What are the thoughts that she had? What made her feel frustrated? What made her feel anger? What made her feel anxiety? And what made her feel sadness? So her thoughts in that case were the ones listed here. She will think, well, he's not happy, he has no education, he does not respect me, I am a bad mother, I don't know how to raise him up, I have failed, I am worthless, and he doesn't love me. So those are all the things that Mrs. K has noted on the spreadsheet. Okay, and the last column would be her behaviors. What does she do in reaction to her thoughts and to those emotions? We know what she did. She yelled at her son. Another situation. So, but without her son this time. She's alone. She's watching TV and she sees a stain on the window. Her emotions and sensations. She feels anxiety, sadness, and in her body she feels an internal tension. Her thoughts, well, she will think, my house is dirty, I have to clean it up, and everything must be cleaned. Her behaviors, she will get up and clean the whole house. So there is a mistake here at the last sentence. So she, after the meaning of the automated thought, is that I am a bad person. I am worthless. Whenever she has those thoughts, those automated thoughts, my house is dirty, I have to clean it up, everything must be clean, she believes, because we have asked her questions, that when the house is dirty, when the house is dirty, it makes her feel like she is a bad person and that she's worthless. And this is because she believes that it triggers action, and she cleans the whole house. Another situation in a completely different it's a completely different situation because this is during an exercise that the therapist has asked her to do. It's a relaxation exercise. So I will do a short session later of relaxation. We learn that technique to our patients very often. It is a technique, a very important tool, which can help them deal with their emotions, anxiety, anger, sadness. So it requires training, which is why we teach that tool very early in therapeutical process. So anyway, during the course of relaxation exercise, she feels anxiety, sadness, guilt. Her thoughts are, I am not doing anything. Her behavior, usually she avoids doing nothing, so she's always active, cleaning, putting away things, cooking, doing things for everybody. She must, this is one thought, I must keep myself busy all the time. So the meaning of the automated thought is that I am worthless. When I am not doing anything, it means that I am worthless. And the meaning of the automated thought, we reached it when we question the automated thoughts. We asked her, well, what is how do you feel when you're not doing anything, or what does it mean when you're not doing anything? We ask her questions like this to make her think about what is the consequence of not doing anything, and by asking a few questions like that, we reach the her belief, which is that she is worthless. And we come to the concept of beliefs and rules, which are hiding behind the automated thoughts. Usually they are not conscious, they are unconscious, and they require some work to uncover them. So unconditional rules, examples are, I must not disappoint others, or one has to be perfect to have value. Those are examples of rules that some people may obey to. We can see that they are very extreme, and they function in a black and white manner. It's a yes or no. I must not disappoint others. So if you usually, when you obey to that rule, and if you disappoint one person, you are not faithful to that rule, and it must probably trigger some anxiety. Or if one is obeying to the second rule, and has to be perfect to have value, you can imagine what happens when that person makes a mistake, or two mistakes, or does not succeed in something. Is it possible to succeed in everything? But with a rule like that, then there is no room for failure. So the rules are usually very extreme. And the conditional rules that are as extremes are the unconditional ones. They just take a different form. Example, if the other is not happy with me, then he does not love me. We imagine what would do someone who obeys to that rule. That person will put aside his own desires and needs, and will constantly try to please people, because when she does not, or when he does not, the consequence is terrible, because she believes that she will not be loved. She will lose the other person's love. So the consequence is very tragic. And the second example, it's a little bit like the second example we talked about earlier regarding the unconditional rules. So in that case, if it is not perfect, then I am worthless. It is the same rule that one has to be perfect to have value. It just takes a different form. And again, there is no room for failure, or there's no room for being second or third. We must always be the first one, the best. So where do come from these rules and beliefs? That's an interesting question, but I already gave you some answers to that question earlier. Remember? Well, you won't be surprised that we frequently, when we all the time go through personal history analysis, we look at elements of the diachrony. The diachrony is the history of Mrs. K. So Mrs. K, she had a very demanding father and a submissive mother. So a demanding father, I imagine that he was always asking for more, and usually this kind of father requires the children to perform well at school. Mrs. K was punished if her academic results were not excellent. His father wanted her to be first of her class. So we see some operant conditioning there. If she doesn't perform well, the consequence is to be punished. It's a negative consequence. So it will she will want to avoid not working well, and she will want to get to work well to avoid punishment. And she suffered from physical punishments. She was locked in a closet and deprived of pleasure. So those are some elements of history that could explain why she learned to be perfect, and why she doesn't accept, for instance, something that is not perfect, such as a stain on the window. So I would like you to do an exercise. So I would like you to think of a recent situation or an event which resulted in a negative mood shift. So you have experienced some anxiety, some sadness, or some anger. And well, you are mostly alone in front of your computer, so you cannot do the exercise with the group. But never mind, you will be playing both parts, the therapist and the client. So as a client, you think of a recent situation, and as a therapist, you be your own therapist. So you will try to identify the thoughts, the feelings, and the behaviors. Well, the feelings will be the ones that help you identify a specific situation. So just write, just have 3 columns, and then in the first columns you note, you put the emotion. In the second, you write the thoughts, and in the third situation, you write the behaviors. The questions here are the questions that you can ask yourself to help you in the exercise. Identify a recent significant shift in mood. What was the situation? How did you feel? Emotion, physiology, sensation, body changes. What was going through your mind at the time? So what were your thoughts? This is a question you can ask yourself. And what did you do? So I let you a few minutes think about the situation and fill out the columns: emotions, thoughts, and behaviors. Okay, so you must have had enough time to jot down some of your thoughts and behaviors, and to experience the exercise of asking yourself, reflecting about a specific situation, things that we don't do exactly like this. And what is important with those questions is that we ask our patients to bring them to the next session, and they help us as therapists to uncover beliefs and rules that are hidden behind those thoughts, as I explained it earlier. Sorry, also, you should have asked yourself also, what were the consequences of your behaviors? You remember in the operant conditioning, which is one of the learning mechanisms, consequences are important, because if we experience good consequences, it will reinforce the previous behavior, and negative consequences will prevent us from repeating the previous behavior. So some examples of the pathological field. For instance, this is how we explain the the panic. This is the cognitive model of panic. So the model to understand a panic attack is this one. We believe that there is an internal. So this is just an example. This is not the model. So there is an internal or an external trigger. We take the example of the plane, the one we saw earlier. So there is a turbulent flight. A threat might be perceived by someone. The person earlier, she thought, we might crash, I'm going to die. So a threat is perceived. It will trigger anxiety, panic, as we saw. This anxiety, panic will trigger some physical and cognitive symptoms: heart racing, breathless, difficulty breathing, choking sensation, shaking, sweating. There will be a catastrophic interpretation of those symptoms. The person might believe that she will suffocate and die because she feels so bad with those body reactions. And the catastrophic interpretations of those symptoms will increase anxiety. And anxiety increasing, it might increase as well the physical and cognitive symptoms. And with the increase of the physical symptoms, it might increase negative thoughts, etc., etc. The person will want to have avoidance and safety behaviors. She will look for reassurance, ask her companion, look at faces of other travelers, ask cabin crew, and she will eventually avoid flying. And the consequence of those safety and avoidance behaviors, they will, as expected, reduce the physical symptoms. So the consequence is a reduction of the negative emotion. So it will reinforce her previous behaviors, which are the avoidance behaviors. So you see here an example of the operant conditioning. Okay, the last arrow was just to explain that the thoughts, the catastrophic thoughts that she has contribute to the behaviors. The cognitive model of depression. So Beck, you remember, he's the very important psychologist who worked a lot on depression. So this is the model that we use to understand, one of the models that we use to understand depression. So according to Beck, during early experiences, we create, we build some core beliefs and assumptions regarding things, regarding the way we should be, who we are, how to see the others, what to think of the future, how to behave in certain circumstances, what to do to be loved. So those are core beliefs and assumptions. And then during the course of the person's life, there might be a critical incident, something that that is something bad that happens to the person. It will trigger negative automatic thoughts. This critical incident could be losing a job, the end of a sentimental romantic relationship. It could be moving out of living in a new place, a new environment, the death of someone. So these critical incidents will trigger negative automatic thoughts. Notice that to make it short, we call them NATs, N-A-T-S. We will see this abbreviation later. So negative automatic thoughts, which, of course, you know that by now will trigger negative feelings, and it will trigger also will influence some of our behaviors, etc. So how automatic thoughts are formed? We have just seen that our core beliefs and assumptions are created during childhood and during a teenager's time. So at the center of our personality, we have core beliefs. They give birth to assumptions, and they produce the negative automatic thoughts. It is because I believe that everything should be perfect, that when Mrs. K is in her sofa watching a stain on a window, then this is because the core belief, everything must be perfect, because this belief is activated, that she will have the automatic thought, oh, I must clean up. This house is dirty. So a negative automatic thought is very often linked to the specific situation, and is produced by core beliefs and assumptions. I hope that everything is clear and that I'm not going too fast, and I hope that you understand me and that everything works well. I'm so sorry not to have any feedback. As I said, we've had trouble with the technology. We did our best, but it's not perfect. So, regarding negative automatic thoughts, to define them, we would say that it's a stream of thoughts that we can notice if we try to pay attention to them. Their main characteristic is that they are automatic. They come to our mind. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to reflect, think about the what's going on. They're just here. We can't prevent them from coming, which makes them very powerful and difficult to change because they are automatic. They are usually negatively tinged appraisals or interpretations. There are meanings that we take from what happens around us or within us. And they are specific thoughts about specific events or situations. Like earlier with this case with her window. The window is really dirty. This house is dirty. Or it could be when she was not able to get her son come for dinner. She thought that she wasn't a good mother, or doesn't like me, doesn't love me. Those thoughts were influenced by the environment, by the situations. And another characteristic is that they are brief, frequent, and habitual, often not heard. It is only when we ask our patients to write them down that they become really conscious. Some of them may be heard, but when we have experienced very often those thoughts, when we have thought very often that we are worth nothing, that I'm a bad mother, that I'm no good. When I have been through many situations where I have experienced those thoughts, then what I experience mostly is the emotion, and the thought is not very obvious, but I feel bad. I feel the emotion, the negative emotion. I may feel anger, sadness, or anxiety. And it is only if I question myself that I may realize that I think I am worthless, I am a bad mother. So one of the advantage of the columns that we ask our patients to fill out is to make them more conscious and to have those thoughts written. So sometimes those thoughts, they are plausible and taken as obviously true, especially when emotions are strong. So we are, because they are automated and because we are used to hear them, to think them, we hold them to be true, and they have that because the emotion is there, it gives them the power to sound true. We don't question them. We really stick to those thoughts. And even if we have people around us trying to prove us that we are wrong, we won't believe them. I'm sure you have examples on your mind with yourself or with some people when you're trying to prove them that they are good people, that they are worth, that they have a lot of qualities, that they are worth being loved, and you state them. You can make a list of all those things that are true, but the other person you are trying to convince or say, but no, I don't agree. This is not the way I feel about me. You say this is not the way I feel about me. So this way of saying things, this is not the way I feel about me, it doesn't mean that the list is false. It's just that because that person has experienced very often the emotion linked to that thought, it is familiar to that person, and this is where is the confusion. It's not because it's familiar that it is true, but it is familiar. It sounds true. That's the problem. It sounds true. So, how to identify nuts? Well, like in the previous exercise, looking at emotions is important. The emotions are. It is an automatic reaction that we have. It's and it tells us that something has happened. It is a global way of judging things. It is an affect tells us immediately if the thing that has just happened is it good for us, is it bad for us, gives us an immediate feedback on the situation. So that's what you want to look for, a shift in affect. It is important to make a distinction between thoughts, emotions, and behavior. And also check for images, images that the person might have that are frequent, that come back very often. So the cognitive model of depression. Beck, again, came up with a triad, a negative cognitive triad. We can talk about depression, according to Beck, when the person has a biased view of oneself. For instance, I am bad, useless, unlovable, worthless, I am a failure. When the person has a biased view of the world in general, nothing good happens. Life is just a series of trials. This is negative, okay? And a biased view of the future. It will always be like this. Nothing I can do will make any difference. What's the point of anything? Very negative. So the negative triad is about oneself, the others, the world, and the future. When you think negatively about yourself, about the people, the world around you, and about the future, then we can assume that you have a very a depression. Does not allow you doesn't allow us to give a diagnostic, but it tells us that that person is experiencing very, very negative thoughts, and that we might have to, it might be a depression. So there are also frequent negative filters in depression. The filters are some logical errors that people make when experiencing when living a situation. We may sometimes overgeneralize. Something bad happened, we make a mistake, and instead of saying, well, this is just a mistake, I have been succeeding many times, but this is a mistake, then if we overgeneralize, one mistake will be enough to state, well, I'm worthless, I will never succeed. Or we may draw wrong conclusions, or we may maximize things, minimize others, not see certain things and see others. So those are filters. In the case of depression, we use negative filters. We will remember events, and most often negative events, and we forget, and we won't take into account positive things. This is one filter. We will give interpretations, and of course negative interpretations, to current events and situations. We will see the bottle half empty and not the bottle half full. And we will overgeneralize from small negative event to broad negative conclusions. This is the example I gave you just earlier. I make a mistake, I'm worth nothing. I'm worthless. So the goals of a therapy for depression, we want to help the client counteract negative cognitive bias and develop more balanced view of herself, the world, and the future. So thanks to the columns that the person will fill out during the day or during the sessions, we are able to get in touch with all the thoughts, the negative thoughts that the person might have about herself, about the world, the future. And with the help of the therapist, we can look at, we can question those thoughts with some techniques that we have. We can question them and test them and make sure that it's true, and try to have the patient think, evaluate things differently. We will, it's very important here, we will restore certain levels of activity, because usually people who are depressed, they reduce their level of activities, they stop doing things, they stop going out, some of them have lost their job, they lose friends, they may even lose companions. So it is important to restore levels of activity, especially those that give sense of pleasure and achievement. So with the help of the therapist, we look at the agenda of our patients. We look at all the things that they do, and if we believe that they spend a lot of time at home not doing anything, watching TV, thinking, then we agree with our patients to on certain activities, things that they will do. Certain patients sometimes stay in bed for a long time, and of course it is not a positive thing, because they think, and they think negatively, as you might have guessed. So we may agree with the patient for them to, well, get up after 15 minutes staying in bed and make coffee, get dressed, etc., etc. So we increase active engagement and problem solving. There's we want them to face the problems in their lives, and we give them tools. There is a problem solving technique. It's a technique that we use we teach our patients to help them solve their problems, practical problems. So during the course of treatment, practically we will identify specific problem lists and prioritizing them. So this problem list may include poor sleep, problem in relationships, etc. We will introduce a cognitive model and see how it might apply to the client. Well, we've seen the model of depression, model of panic attacks. We have other models to explain mental health problems like social anxiety, social phobia, eating disorders, etc. We set goals goals based on
what the wants, and based on what we understand of the pathology, the problem of the patient's problem. And we will aim at reducing symptoms through behavioral, cognitive strategies and emotional techniques. So we want our patients to feel better and to feel better in their life. So we set goals for them to experiment progress, very short-term progress on small things at first, and then bigger later. It is important to have them experience progress to reinforce the alliance and motivation in the therapy. We will also teach them how to identify and challenge the automated thoughts. So I mentioned the columns that we ask them at first to fill out. So we start with a few number of columns, just situation, the emotion, the sensation, and the behaviors. And then after we introduced a list of the list of logical the cognitive errors that we do, the filters that I've mentioned. So once we have explained that sometimes when we think and make some errors, logical errors, so they might learn to recognize those errors, and once we have challenged the thoughts, and we can come up with alternative thoughts. Thoughts that are more useful than the ones they have, than the ones which are automated. And then during the course of after treatment, we have a session also regarding relapse, because what is automated is very powerful. And it takes time before stopping something that is automated, and it takes time before being able to replace something that is automated with something else that hopefully will become automated. So the different phases of a typical course of therapy. There is a first phase of assessment and formulation. Assessment, during that phase, we gather information, and we gather information about the life of the patient, about the problems they experience right now, here in present time. We gather information about the symptoms, about the things that they've done to solve their problems, and we come up with a hypothesis regarding their problem, and we formulate a case. We try to explain what is it that the patient is experiencing, why Is he experiencing that? So we take in account a lot of information to explain the actual problems. Then there is a phase of treatment, and we start with symptom-focused intervention to reinforce the alliance and to motivate the patient. We make a review every 6 sessions with repeated measures. During the when we start the treatment, we take measures. It could be through questionnaires that we give to our patients, or it could be also with measures that we take of the level of anxiety, a level of depression, or level of activity, and because we are going to repeat those measures along the session, and after 6 weeks we can see if there has been some progress as anxiety decreased, as the negative mood has decreased. And then the last phase is a discharge. So at the end of the therapy, we of course repeat the measures, and then we talk about relapse. As we said in the previous slide, relapses might occur. It is important for patients to know about this possibility and to know what to do if it happens, and also what to do to prevent it from happening again. So we have a session where we make a summary of all the things that have worked during the treatment, of all the tools that the patient has learned to use, and some of them she should keep using them, like for instance relaxation or mindfulness. And then it happens also that we agree to see our patients in 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, or on demand, and let them know that it is possible for them to call us and have a booster session, just to make sure that things are all right, and it helps very often our patients to do that. So a typical CBT treatment session, when we have our patient coming over, it starts like that. We set an agenda of the session, of the hour, if it is 1 hour. We agree on things that we're going to see. We usually ask our patients if there is anything that has happened during the time preceding the session. We also ask them if there is any feedback on the last session. We review homework. There is always, we always give homework to our patients because, as I mentioned it earlier, we are dealing with automated mechanisms, and it takes a lot of energy and work to fight those automatisms. And which is why we ask our patients to do things between sessions, to do things to try to replace those automated thoughts on behaviors by something more efficient, fruitful. So we review homework, and then we focus on major topics for the sessions. It could be a specific situation that has occurred during the past weeks, or it could be about a new tool that we want our patient to learn. We set homework for the week, and we ask the patient if she or he sees any problem regarding the completion of the homework. And then we ask if there is any feedback on the session. So you see that there's a lot of things to do in one session. And it is important to set this agenda because it allows us to keep an eye on the watch, to make sure that we do everything. So what are the therapy skills that are required? Engagement, of course, but this is engagement is what we expect from most therapists, whereas they are CBT or others. It is we are dealing with people suffering, and it is an important subject, and we need to be engaged. It requires warmth and empathy. It sounds obvious. Collaboration. Okay, we therapists, we have information. We know certain things about psychological problems, but we cannot force our patients to do things that they don't approve. So we must make sure that we agree on all things, and we must take our patients where they are and help them change. We cannot force things. We use the guided discovery, or what we call the Socratic questioning. Socratic questioning is a way of questioning the obvious, and playing the part of being naive regarding what is stating. For instance, each time that the patient is stating something, we must we ask them for more explanations, and we can use sentences like, what do you mean exactly by that? Or can you give me the definition of that word that you are using, worthless, for instance? What does it mean, worthless? So it's sometimes we get imprisoned by words, which is why Socratic questioning is useful, because it allows us to go beyond the words that we have been using, well, that the patient have been using over and over, and they lose track of what it is exactly. So Socratic questioning is a very powerful tool. We use feedback, and we summarize also the things that we talk. We use. It is important to structure the time. Structure the time, and to be able to focus on the things that we have set in the agenda. And we use open and closed questioning according the situations. Lucy, so example, Lucy is an example. I don't know if it's gonna work It is a link, but okay, let's see what it if it works. Okay, it should.
Hi Lucy, nice to meet you.
Hi.
So I understand that you were referred here by your GP because you've been feeling quite down recently.
Yeah, I thought I've been feeling quite bad for quite a while, so I thought maybe it's time to see someone about it because I don't want to feel like this anymore.
Okay, so from your notes I saw that you saw the GP about 3 months ago.
Yeah.
So how long have you been feeling down altogether?
Quite a few months before that as well, actually, but it's gotten pretty bad these past few months, so that's kind of why I came.
Okay, so has it got worse since you saw your GP?
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me, Helen, how are things at the moment?
Well, it kind of started just feeling a bit low and wound up about things, but I don't know, just recently I just can't really be bothered to do anything at all. I kind of find it hard to get motivated for things, and I really want to be better, but it's just kind of reaching the end now where I want to do something about it.
Okay, so you said that you're feeling really down, really sad.
Yeah.
And you feel like you haven't got any motivation. But are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine, sorry.
Okay, and you haven't got any motivation, but it sounds like you're putting quite a lot of pressure on yourself to try and feel a bit better.
Yeah, it's kind of hard as well because there's not really anyone to talk about, so I just kind of stay on my own I don't like to think about it, but I just know.
Okay. So you say you've been you're feeling quite isolated. There's not many people around.
Yeah, there's no one I can talk to about it. No one would listen or understand anyway.
Okay, so I'm just going to try and find out a little bit more about you. So I understand that you're an English student at uni.
Yeah.
And you live away from home with some friends. Is that right?
Yeah, I live here.
Okay, so you don't live far from the uni. But you say you feel like you live with your friends, but you don't feel like you can talk to them.
Yeah, I mean, they're lovely. I get on really well with them, but I don't know. I just recently, whenever they want to go out or stuff, I don't want to bring them down. They don't understand what I'm going through. They kind of, I don't know. They don't make fun of how I feel, but they don't really understand what it's like. I don't want to go out with them and bring them down or stuff.
Okay, so it sounds, do you try and hide the way you're feeling from them?
I guess, I mean, it's easier to hide it than to try and explain it all the time when no one really wants to know.
Okay, so it sounds like you've been feeling down, you've been feeling unmotivated, you feel like you want to be better, but actually it sounds like you feel like you can't reach out for help, you can't speak to anybody.
No, I don't really talk to my parents a lot either,
Okay.
so that's kind of hard.
Okay, I'm just going to go back in time a little bit. I suppose I'm just wondering, when did all of this start? You said it's been going on for quite a few months.
Yeah, I guess it kind of started when I was revising for my exams. I guess the stress, I put a lot of stress on myself. I think I've always wanted to do well for me and I guess for my parents, so the stress of exams, and it was also kind of hard because my parents were going through a bit of a troubled time then. So.
Okay, so this would be like last March, last April?
Yeah, I think so.
Around that time, so about 6 months-ish. Yeah. And it sounds like a lot was happening, so you had a lot of uni pressure on, and you said that your parents were having marital problems?
Yeah.
Okay, and it sounds like that was a real shock to you.
Yeah, I guess it was hard as well because I wasn't doing well at uni. I guess I just felt a bit guilty. I know it sounds silly, but I felt like maybe if I could do better, then they would get better, but it just wasn't really happening.
Okay, so it sounds like you were trying to work hard and be more successful because you thought that would make them happier and try and fix things.
Yeah, I wanted to make them feel better, but it just kind of backfired a little, I guess.
How did it backfire?
Well, it just ended up with them getting worse, and I've just been feeling worse since then.
Okay, so after the summer, after the exam period, and how did that exam period go for you in the end?
Not very well.
Okay, that's an awful lot of pressure to put on yourself. I suppose to think.
It's just annoying because I know I should have done better and I just didn't, and I guess I beat myself up a lot about it.
So you say, I know I should have done better.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose that hearing it from my perspective, I'm thinking it sounds like you had an awful lot going on at the time, and it'd be understandable, absolutely, that you wouldn't do as well as normal. I suppose I'm just wondering if you have very high standards for yourself.
Probably, maybe more than other people. My parents have always kind of taught me, not in a loving way, I guess, but that you should do your best, but also get the best. And I agree with that. I think that's the right thing to think. But when I don't do that, I don't know. It annoys me a lot, and I worry that it annoys them.
So it sounds like you feel you should always do your best. Is that the word you used? Yeah. And that there isn't any kind of exceptions for that.
No.
Okay. So I can see then that was a really difficult time for you, and that was when your mood started to get lower, and things are still quite bad now. I mean, what's the situation with your parents at the moment?
I think it doesn't sound good. I don't really talk to them a lot, but I don't think they're going through a very good thing. I don't like to talk to them about it because it just makes me feel worse.
Okay.
But I don't think it's getting any better.
Were you home over the summer?
For a little bit, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And how was that?
Not very fun.
Okay. Okay. My presentation. Sorry. Okay. So this is that was an example to show you how the therapist was behaving with was using those some of those skills, and she showed I think that you agree with me that she showed some warmth and empathy, and she used a lot of open and closed questioning. Have you observed also that she did a lot of feedback and summarizing? Well, so that was an interesting video also to show you the kind of questions that we could ask to a patient, and you see that Lucy she had some high expectations regarding herself, that the therapist could make the link with the education that she received with her father. So this is an example of a session. You've been seeing what's going on between a therapist and a patient. So let's go through some into details. So aims of assessment is to initiate and develop a therapeutic relationship with the patient. We evaluate as well if there is a suitability for CBT. CBT requires certain qualities, being able to get in touch with our thoughts, and it requires also some humility. I mean, but that you accept that certain things that you are doing might not be the most appropriate strategies or behaviors, and that they are damaging to yourself or damaging to others. So it might not suit everybody. Some people may not agree with that. You also have other people who are very fond of other sorts of therapy, and might not agree with the principles that I have been through with you earlier. So in assessment, we gather specific information, recurrent difficulties. We try to uncover the maintaining factors. What is it in the current situation that prevents the patient to change? Sometimes patients get a lot of benefits out of their mental health problem, and so getting better will make them lose those advantages. So it's important to take them into account. There is an initial formulation, what we understand of the patient's problem. It is a formulation that evolves during the course of the therapy, because we keep learning new things. Even when treatment has started, we keep an open eye and ear to make sure that the initial formulation keeps being the good one, the way how to look at the patient's problem. We introduce the CBT model to the patient. We explain what is the theory behind it, how we work, and we try to come to a common understanding of the patient's problem, as well as the goals. So suitability for short-term CBT, as I said, it's there must be the patient must have the ability to identify and describe negative thoughts. He must be able to be aware and make differences to differentiate all the emotion, and there must be compatibility with the CBT rational. So the CBT rational, I have another link here.
Well, I think this is a challenge. In one sentence, why and how do you think cognitive therapy works?
So here, this is Aaron Beck.
Well, first of all,
I think it's a great question.
I think it's a terrific question, and the question is, what is cognitive therapy? And so cognitive therapy is not just a box of techniques. It's not a toolbox any more than, let's say, the Taj Mahal could be considered just a toolbox. Cognitive therapy is actually an architecture. And in order to understand cognitive therapy, you have to understand the blueprint that is provided the architecture. Once you know the blueprint, then you can use the tools, and then you can build a building, or you can build a therapy based on that. So the theory of cognitive therapy, very briefly, is that individuals in the course of their development experience certain vulnerabilities, and these vulnerabilities can be symbolized by maladaptive attitudes. So one of the vulnerabilities that somebody might have is, if I talk in public, people are going to ridicule me, or if I try something hard, I'm not going to be able to make it. And over a period of time, with some individuals, these particular attitudes become fortified and kind of translocated. they tend to permeate the individual's whole personality. And so you get, in some cases, what you call personality disorder, because these dysfunctional beliefs are so deeply encrusted that they kind of dominate the individual's interactions and adjustments. So that's kind of what happens in the Axis 2 disorders. And the Axis 1 disorders, particularly depression, which we've been seeing now, is that these negative attitudes that people have had over time become activated as a result of something that happens, a whole series of things that impinge on their specific vulnerabilities, on their dysfunctional attitudes. And then, as a result of that, they start to see things in a biased way. So they go then from biased attitudes such as, I'm no good, to the biased perception, which is, people don't listen to me, it means I'm no good. And the perception itself then is twisted. It's not based on evidence, but it's based on internal factors. So how does cognitive therapy work? Well, cognitive therapy works by virtue of its changing certain key elements in this theoretical construction that I just gave you. It works through changing the negative. In the case of depression, it works in changing the negative perceptions so that the person no longer sees things in terms of black and white, which is mainly black. And more basically, it changes the biased beliefs such as I'm no good, or I'm a failure, or I'm unlovable, and so on. So when we do studies of the efficacy of cognitive therapy and we look for what accounts for the change, the improvement in cognitive therapy, we find that there's been a change in the basic attitudes and also in the perceptions. So if you give people a test, we used to do this with a binocular test, and in a binocular test there are two images that are shown, one for each eye. And when there are competing images coming into the eye, then certain psychological factors determine which of the two images you see. It's something called binocular rivalry. When people are depressed and you see two images, they're going to see the negative image. When they get over the depression, they're going to see the positive image. So that even at a perceptual level, cognitive therapy or any therapy that works is going to change not only the beliefs but also the perceptions. Now, if you'd like, I could tell you the kind of pictures. You interested? Okay. So one of the pictures we had when we did the study is we had a table. There was a table, and there's a group of people sitting around the table, and there are several vases with flowers, and the people are all smiling and happy. Then the companion picture is matched for the density. However, around the table on the table is a coffin, and the same number of people are looking at the coffin instead of the flowers, and they all look very sad. So the depressed person will see the sad picture. Interesting, not by choice, but happens automatically, sees the bad picture, but doesn't see the good one. When they're treated successfully, the bad picture goes away and they only see the good one. So this shows that at the most primitive level, people who are depressed see things negatively. So how does cognitive therapy work? It changes the negative image. How does it change the negative image? By getting at the basic negative beliefs, which is kind of a simplified way of putting it, but I think that my way of thinking is the way it works.
Okay, so I think that it was an interesting video because first you get to see someone who is very important in the cognitive behavior field, and I'm referring to Aaron Beck, the old man that you've just seen. He's not as famous as Sigmund Freud, but he should be, because He has introduced a revolution in the field of psychology, and then, well, he was giving you a good definition and explanation of what is CBT. So, what are the other items? It's an acceptance of personal responsibility for change. This is what I mentioned earlier. And alliance potential. How am I going to feel with this patient, and how this patient is going to feel with me? Is he going to feel comfortable? Is he going to feel empathy from me? It is a very, very important factor that counts a lot in the success of therapy, whatever is the therapy. And then we have to take into account the chronicity of the problem. The more chronic it is, the more difficult it is to work. But that's the case for most therapy. And also, what is the level of optimism and pessimism regarding the therapy, which determines the level of motivation also. So it is a very demanding kind of therapy, so it requires to work. You remember I told you that we give assignments to our patients, so they must believe in the therapy, they must trust the therapist, they must believe that they can change. So those are elements that need to be taken into account to start a CBT. Homework. So we can ask them to identify a recent significant shift in mood, as I have asked you to do that in the exercise. So, what was the situation? How did you feel? What was going on through your mind at the time? What did you do? What were the consequences? Measures. So why do we measure? So we measure. Measurement is central. During the assessments, it provides us information to allow us to measure. It allows us to have baselines, to follow treatment and how things evolve. It helps us check effectiveness. It allows us to have feedback on things and to get knowledge, to gather data for future research. So what sort of measures? They could be standardized, meaning that there are questionnaires that have been developed by psychologists and tested with specific techniques. So, for instance, we have the Beck Depression Inventory, the Beck Anxiety Inventory. You see how Beck is famous. But there are a lot of other questionnaires, so they can be standardized. But you can have also individualized measurements. They allow for more specific information for assessment and formulations. It could be how would you define your problem, and see how this definition evolves along the course of treatment. It could be targets of therapy that may change. It could be diaries, and look at the contents of the diaries. How often do we have situations? Do we have less and less situations that trigger emotions? It could be the percentage of belief, the percentage of belief, the ratings of specific emotions. It could be a lot of different things. So what are the cognitive kind of interventions? One technique is what we call cognitive restructuring. So we try to restructure thoughts and beliefs. It's more easy to say than to do, as you can imagine. But with the different techniques that I have showed you, we can come to have the patient agree on a change of his belief. Of course, we want him to have beliefs that are less rigid, that allow for more mistakes, and that are more based on reality and proofs, things that can be tested rather than things that sound true. Okay? So we use the guided discovery, the thought diaries. We challenge the automated thoughts. We address thinking errors, logic errors. We use the responsibility pie. When someone feels responsible for something that happens, we can ask the question to see there could be other explanations, and make a list of all the possible explanations, and then we evaluate the level of responsibility of the person. We use cost and benefit analysis, or the advantage and disadvantages of behavior. What does it help? What does it bring you to follow this behavior? What does it bring you, and what are the disadvantages? What are the advantages to change? What are the disadvantages to not change? Short term, long term. So, what else? There is also another technique, the downward arrow technique. Here is an example. Oops, sorry. Okay. Okay, I went too far, I'm sorry. Let's go through. Oops. Maybe I clicked on the... Okay. Here is the another video. And you'll see how we use the downward technique. The downward arrow technique.
Okay, so you said that when you're at work, you really worry that you're going to say something stupid.
Yeah, that's something that's always on my mind.
What would be so bad about that if you did say something stupid at work?
Because people would think I was weird.
Then what would be so bad if said that when you're at work, weird, you really worry that you're going to say something stupid?
They wouldn't want to be friends with me. Yeah, that's something.
What would be so bad about that if people at work didn't want to be friends with you? What would be so bad about that if you did say something stupid at work?
Have no one to talk to at work.
Then what would be so bad about having no one to talk to at work?
I mean, people would think I was can go on the whole day.
What would be so bad if people at work
be by myself the whole time? They wouldn't want to be friends with me.
And what would be so bad about that if people at work didn't want to be friends with you?
Well, I just have no one to talk to at work.
Then what would be so bad about having no one to talk to at work?
I mean, the shoots can go on
the whole day, so I'd just be by myself the whole time.
And what would be so bad about being by yourself, for a whole day?
I don't know, I guess I should be used to it now. I spend a lot of my time by myself. So.
Oh, that must be tough. What does that mean to you, that you spend a lot of time on your own?
I don't know, I guess it's just like I spend so much time by myself that it's kind of like I'm not even worth being friends with.
So it sounds like deep down that you think that you're not worth being friends with. And that's quite a negative belief. I mean, how much would you say that you believe that out of 100? If 100 is where you believe it totally and 0 is where you don't believe it at all?
I guess like 90 out of 100.
When did you start believing that?
I think it was probably at school. Yeah, I think at school.
And what was it about school that made you start to believe that you weren't worth being friends with?
Just like quite a lot of things. Like I wouldn't have anyone sit with at lunch, or like people's birthdays and stuff I wasn't invited, and like I was the last one picked for teams and stuff like that.
And what is it now that makes you think that that's still true?
I mean, it's kind of similar at work. Obviously, difference is that it's work, not school. But like people go for drinks and stuff after work or after a shoot, and I'm just kind of excluded a lot of the time.
That sounds tough. Is there anything that makes you think that it's not true, that you are worth being friends with?
I guess my friends and family would say that I am. Like I try to make a lot of time for my friends and stuff.
Okay, so it sounds like deep down you have this thought that you're not worth being friends with, and that started at school when you had trouble making friends at school and that you weren't always picked for teams, and that now at work it feels like the same thing is happening, that you're not always invited out for drinks with people after work, and that sometimes you feel that you're excluded from their social groups. But then that's not the whole story, that on the other hand you are close to family and you do have friends who would say that it's not true, that you are worth being friends with. In CBT, we do a thing called thought challenging, where when we have these negative thoughts, sometimes we actually put them up to scrutiny. We weigh up the evidence for and against them. I like to think of it as putting the thought on trial.
Okay.
Could we do that now, where we just actually try and weigh up the evidence for and against that thought a bit more?
Okay.
Okay. So if I just put 2 columns here, so for and against, and it sounds like the evidence for this thought that makes you think that it is true is difficulty at school, making friends, being picked for teams, and difficulty at work, feeling excluded sometimes from groups.
Yeah.
But actually in this other column, we have that you are close with your family and that you have some close friends. Now, moving back to this first column, is there anything else that makes you think it's true that you're not worth being friends with?
Just like I kind of don't go to a lot of stuff. People have like gatherings and things, and a lot of the time I don't go.
Okay,
rather
so
just stay at home.
Don't go to parties. What kind of parties are we talking? Like big parties, small parties?
Mainly big ones. If there's a lot of people there, I just find it kind of makes me really anxious. So a lot of the time I just prefer not even to be in that situation in the first place.
Okay, so you don't go to larger parties and events. Okay, is there anything else that maybe makes you think that it's not true, that actually you are worth being friends with?
I mean, I guess my friends would say that I was. I do have close friends, and when it's like their stuff that's important to them, I always make sure that I think about that, and even if I find it stressful, I'll always make sure that I can kind of put them first.
Okay, so your friends would say that you are worth being friends with, and it sounds like you put your friends first.
Yeah, I do make sure I try and do that.
In what kind of ways do you put your friends first?
I guess when it's birthdays or something important to them, I'll always make sure that I'm there and that I put a lot of thought into presents and stuff like that.
Can you give me an example of a time that you've done that?
It was my friend's birthday a few weeks ago, and we did like a big surprise at hers, and I made a cake and stuff like that.
So you actually helped to organise events for your friends?
Yeah.
Is there anything that you do that you wouldn't do if you weren't a good friend?
I guess that I kind of always put myself in a situation, even if I find it it makes me anxious. If it's for my close friends and I know that it's something that's important to them, then I'll always put them first and make sure I'm there.
So you'll tolerate your anxiety if it means something to a friend of yours?
Yeah.
Okay, so at the moment in the 4 category, we've got that you had difficulty making friends at school, that you're having difficulty now at work making friends, and that you don't go to larger parties or events. But actually, there's a lot of evidence in the against column, evidence that would suggest that actually you are worth being friends with and you're a good friend, that you're close with your family, you're close with your friends. Your friends would say that you're a good friend. You put your friends first. Even when you're anxious, you tolerate that anxiety if you know it will mean something to them. That when things are important to your friends, like birthdays, you'll make a real effort. You'll even actually go to the effort of organising events and baking cakes and doing things like that for other people. Is there anything else that you do that makes you think that maybe you are a good friend, you are worth being friends with?
I mean, I still have my friends, so I guess if I wasn't worth being friends with, I wouldn't have these friends that I've had for quite a long time.
Okay, so it sounds like you've got long-term friendships as well, so you might have trouble making friends, but when you make them, you stick with them.
Yeah.
Okay, I was going to give you this list now to have a look at.
Okay.
How do you feel now that you're looking at that list?
It's weird. There's actually kind of more stuff in the against than there is in the for. I guess also a lot of the stuff that is in the for column is kind of things that I make happen. Like I don't go to things. Yeah, it seems like some of it's kind of in my hands.
So it's not that you're not worth being friends with, but actually that you're choosing not to engage with people always.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And if I was to ask you now, this idea that you're not worth being friends with, how much do you believe that now that we've done this exercise, where 100 is where you really believe that you're not worth being friends with, and 0 is that you don't believe it?
I guess I'd say maybe 40. I do still think that it might be true, but I think I believe it less than I did before.
Okay, so you see, you've seen what's going on in the session, and you've seen how the therapist is changing is using the downward arrow technique to reach to a belief that she has and how she challenges this belief. I think it was short but interesting. So. In other cognitive interventions, there is a lot of education. We use there is a continuous use of formulation. We use imagery technique, role play and role reversal, action play. So there's a lot of techniques that we use. In behavioral interventions, we use a very powerful method it is a powerful method for bringing about change. Actions, doing things. It is the best way to change our beliefs. It is borrowed and adapted from the behavior therapy, and it incorporates different methodological approaches. There is an example, for instance, hyperventilation to simulate panic and experience the symptoms that we experience during panic, but with the therapist, just to explain that what's going on. Activity monitoring and scheduling. Okay, so I won't go through that example. There's the problem-solving technique. We identify a problem to be worked on. We think as many as solutions as possible. We consider each solution, the pros and cons. We pick up the solution that appears best, and we take small steps. We define what are the steps, and we take action, we review, and if it doesn't work, we use something else. So there are emotional interventions as well, relaxation, mindfulness, exposure to emotions, and music. During the relapse prevention, what have I learned? What was most useful? What can I continue to do? When will I be at risk of this happening again? What are the signs? What could I avoid? What could I do to avoid losing control? And what could I do if I did lose control? So I've been through that earlier. Coping with relapse. How can I make sense of this lapse? There's always something to learn from a relapse. If we consider that it may happen, it becomes less dramatic if it happens. What have I learned from it? And with insight, what would I do differently? So CBT takes a lot from other sort of therapy, schema-focused therapy, metacognitive therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy. We find CBT in a lot of different therapies. Well, this is the end. I thank you for your presence. I apologize again for the delay, and I'm sorry that I've not been able to interact with you because we had some technological problems. But I hope it will be useful, and do not hesitate to contact the person in charge of the program if you want to reach out to me and ask me more questions. Okay, well, have a good evening or day, and bye-bye.